Just an example from the Amsterdam police. They were able to match hotel robberies to each other because within the notes there was on the modus operandi some very specific information that you couldn't store in the other fields. Right? It's the way that that the people were described, that this person came into the hotel, asked for the toilet, and then he came back to the front desk and started the robbery with a very specific sentence. There's no way you can store that in your structured data. And there's all kinds of other things as well that you can use from that unstructured data that gives you more nuances, both in matching crimes together, which we'll get to, but also in getting a more refined picture of what has happened. So my point towards the future is let's try and work on systems that help police officers minimize the administrative burden and maximize their police work on data collection. But we need to start analyzing with what we have now, and we do have a wealth of information, and that can only improve if we add new data. I want to make this session as interactive as possible. There's two people running around with microphones, so if you have a question, raise your hand and somebody will come to you, or if you have a remark, if you don't agree with me, please do. I love discussions. And I know that I am not, what I'm telling is our point of view, my point of view, and I would love to hear yours as well. I've got two business areas that I want to run through as illustrations. Like I said, one on force deployment or patrol operations, the other one on investigations. So let's start with force deployment. And this is a bit of an American scenario. So we have a shift commander, and he needs to deploy his forces for that shift. Right? So he needs to understand the geography, and he needs to know where events are likely to happen. Right? Not where they happened yesterday, or where they happened the months before, or where they happened the year before, right? Where are they likely to happen during my shift of 4 or 8 hours? Right? Because that is the period of time that he needs to deploy his forces. He cannot change what happened yesterday. He can only change what's happening today. So, based on that likelihood of where there's a crime or incident is likely to happen, he deploys his forces. And then the patrol officer notices that there's a change in weather condition. And weather is an important factor in determining the likelihood of crime. And it's different for different types of crimes. If it's raining and cold, antisocial behavior will go down. Right? But if it's raining and cold and dark, also burglaries will go down. Because people will be at home, so it's less likely that homes will be empty. If, however, it's a clear, sunny, or a clear sky, warm night with lots of people on the streets, there will be a lot of antisocial behavior, and still burglary will go down, because then burglars will have a larger probability of being caught, so they will not, because they can be seen. So those are kind of the patterns that weather influence, and there's many more. So he sees that the weather condition that is in the prediction says it's sunny, but he sees that it's raining, which basically means that he updates that for his beat. Given the expectations that he has, he gets a new updated expectation. But then something happens, right? A crash. We need to deploy forces for a large car crash. Where do I take those forces away? Because if I take police forces away, it has an influence on my crime rates, on my incidents. Are people familiar with the research in Philadelphia about the effect of just having a police car in a neighborhood? in Philadelphia, they identified that having a police car in the neighborhood stops crime in that area for 4 hours, because it increases the probability of being caught. One of the things that they did in Memphis, when they started the whole program, the first thing they did is, what are the people that we have sitting in our precincts, in our offices, that should be out on the street, not running the beat, but just being there and being seen. And they took the dog teams, the SWAT teams, all kinds of teams that were just sitting in the precinct, waiting for a call to be deployed, and they deployed them beforehand into areas where they wanted a police car, and even that helped reducing crime, because there was a police car in the neighborhood. So your own actions are part of the whole prediction. If I take out my force deployment, my crime. So how can I actually estimate in real time how I reallocate my forces? From which area do I do that? And then automatically share that with the people on the beat. So behind it is a system that uses predictive analytics combined with police knowledge and combined with other technology. First thing is the crime incidents, the historical crime incidents, similar to crime mapping, right? You have information about location, time, type of crime, things like that. And then you have enabling factors. Enabling factors are already mentioned, weather, right? But you also have the police presence that I already mentioned. And you have triggers, city events, can be big events, right? I mean, nothing as large as the Olympics, so that wouldn't be in there because that's a special project, of course. But there could be pop concerts, there could be fairs, but it could also be smaller events, like a rock band playing in a local pub or in a local venue. Or it could be a sports event, maybe not a large Premier League match, but it could be a match lower down, or it might be a cricket match, whatever. All kinds of events. Paydays are very important. Right? When people receive money, and in some areas, I'm not sure how it is at the moment in the UK, but I think there's still some people getting it actually in cash or in checks. But even if they don't get it in cash and checks, at paydays, if people get paid, they will have money in the bank, they will go to the ATM, get money out of the ATM, and they will have more money in their pockets than normally. So that, for example, has an influence on robberies. But it also has an influence on their behavior. They might start drinking, so that influence on their social behavior. All kinds of other, and there are other things. Holidays are important, right? How many people actually have a day off and are working. So there's all kinds of triggers that you put together to predict the likelihood of crime for the next period. Now you can do that over a longer period, right, which is more kind of for strategic planning and looking at crime trends and crime developments over time. You can do it for a shorter period so that you can do your resource planning for kind of the 6 weeks ahead, which is what happens in a lot of cases. But you can actually bring it down to individual level, but you need to fit it with your operational pattern. That's why I was talking about a shift, right? So you can actually predict per shift with changing circumstances, with new data coming in, with new trends developing within the city, what is likely going to happen in the next 2 or 4 hours. And those models will give you a risk assessment. Right? So here's an example. Right? If it's a Saturday, if there's an entertainment event, if it's the day after payday, in dispatch zone 4, the likelihood that there will be violent crime is 98%. So that's a hot zone. Right? So we're looking at the history like crime mapping, but we're taking other factors we're taking the trends and the developments into consideration to predict the likelihood that something is going to happen in this period. So I might send out an operational alert if this is really what's happening, this comes out. You don't want, if there's a 98% likelihood of crime, you want to alert people, right? You want to send them maybe a message to the relevant people but it also influences the planning. On the other hand, right, specifically for an area, for that officer that's responsible for an area, you can build a specific risk assessment, right? It is raining, the temperature is over 60 degrees Fahrenheit, of course. If there's a high patrol activity, the likelihood that there's no violent crime is 92%. So that's kind of taking into account the activity. And that will actually help with the interactive decisioning, right? If one of those conditions change, the example here, if the condition changes to some, that will have an effect on the probability. So that's kind of the whole story. Now there's different areas where I can go. I can go in the analytical process. Let me see, this should be the, yeah. Can we see this? No, we can't. The different capability, the data that we use, any preferences, any things that come to mind? Or is this all something that is, you're already doing this way?
It seems to me you're describing, albeit with more data and more readily accessible data, sorry if I need that, precisely the approach that police have been adopting to the deployment of forces in cities in particular in this country for donkey's years.
Yes, there's two distinctions, I agree. And actually there are some cities in the UK that have done some very innovative work. There's some forces in the UK, there's that I might come to. But what you have been doing is looking at it from a historical perspective and then trying to actually estimate the probabilities yourself, right? Which is the crime mapping, the hotspot approach, where you describe hotspots and then you say, okay, basically if this has been a hotspot for millions of years, this will still be a hotspot, right? And yes, on average, you're right. And in the real hotspots, there's an no-brainer. You don't need the system to tell you that that's really a problem area, right? So I'm making it very simple. You combine it with the police knowledge and the knowledge that you build up over time. But what you haven't been doing is actually refining that and looking at where did I go wrong, where did I go right, and how do I influence it, and can I bring it down from a planning on maybe a weekly or monthly basis to an hourly or other basis, and can I refine what I'm doing. One of the things that we're working with in the same area is one of the forces on repeat victimization, right? Where do I deploy my community safety officers best? What are the ones that I really need to work at to make sure that we prevent repeat victimization? So it's taking what you've been doing for years and taking it to the next step. But I agree, but it's taking more data, it's taking more advanced analytics and more possibilities. The key is actually, if you look at what those predictive analytics do, it tries to emulate the human brain, right? Most of the algorithms that are in there are trying to emulate the human brain. Only the human brain has a limitation of 7 to 9 dimensions, and predictive analytics doesn't have that limitation. But we combine the two to actually refine and optimize the results. This is an optimization area, but the transformation comes in how you really try to focus and learn from your mistakes all the time. So yes, it's built on the old system, it's a refinement of the old system. Yeah?
It's good having all the data, but if you haven't got a good command structure in place of a person who now don't know how to deal with the different scenarios, it's part of training and experience, surely. A good commander would have already learned how to deal with different scenarios. And to help with those decisions and deployment, then this is where the data comes in, does it not? But if you haven't got a good command structure, all the data in the world wouldn't resolve the issues.
I agree. Right? If you just run this as data, you might as well go to university, right? if there's no structure to deploy it, if there's no, one of the things that is very simplified, kind of the responses that you have, but the key there is that we can refine what we're doing, and we can change what we're doing by using the data in combination with the experience and the knowledge that we already have to target it. But just the key is the analytics is a means, it's not a goal, right? It's a resource, and it's a resource that that can help you actually better focus the rest of your resources.
How does predictive model handle intelligence?
Sorry?
How does the predictive model handle intelligence? So, for example, if the police were doing it without this data analysis, if somebody would be released from prison, for example, you would know that they behave in a certain way, and therefore crimes of a certain type might go up. How would this model take that intelligence and then determine how that would be a trigger or
that will be built into the triggers, right? If you know that there's a certain number of people in an area that have, so you can use that either in the trigger. We don't do it on the individual level, right? But it is a factor that you take into account. And the other thing is that's one of the things where you embed the likelihood of crime and your decision making about deployment within kind of the business rules and business knowledge that you as well have. But for example, the number of violent, previously violent criminals may be even taken into account of their likelihood to re-offend taken from the OASIS system, right, as an indicator to predict the likelihood of crime. But you need to start, the key is there's loads of information that you can put in, and you need to start building it up. It's not like, okay, let's get first all the data together and then think about all the data that we might use. Let's start using data and let's start to improve what we're doing and add more to it after the fact. Because there's, yeah. But it's a good point, thank you.
Hi, I'm a crime manager for Cambridge City. Are any of your triggers weighted? Because, for example, if you wanted to reduce crime, you tackle the people that are committing the crime. I know most of my local burglars and they don't care whether it's hot or sunny. So are any of your triggers weighted in terms of likely outcome?
Okay. Well, that's where the predictive modeling comes in, right? There's no, so for each area, for each city, although there's kind of overall patterns in crime and the way people behave, each individual area will have their individual patterns. So the predictive models will actually take into account that weight. So in your area, right, apparently for burglaries, right, and the example that I've taken was from a different city where that happened. You're waiting for different weather conditions would be different for burglary. So you need to build it for, if there's not kind of, I can build one model that is valid in London and Manchester and Liverpool. No, I need to actually build specific models within the city and in some cases actually areas of the city. So there's more, but the weights come from what you learn from how do people behave in my city, in my area. Is that an answer to? And that's where the likelihood of crime, let's say the two wheels in the middle come from. That's using the algorithms to find those weights and which factors need which weights, which are important, which factors need which weights.
I think the point I'm trying to get to is the reality is I only need to concentrate on a handful of people to reduce crime. If you take those people out of the equation, you don't need to do any of this.
No.
And I can't see in this model where it's heavily weighted towards tackling key people.
Key people is key people depending on the type of crime that we're talking about, right? key people we're usually talking about non-professional criminals. One, you need to know all the professional criminals. Two, one of the examples that we have is actually from Scotland, where they built their own approach for doing this, based on what they now call the recency, frequency, and gravity modeling, where they look also at how recent is a crime committed, how frequent does it be committed, and how serious is the crime, the gravity of the crime. And they do it for places, for victims, and also for perpetrators, and then kind of look at how people are moving through that system. And that brought to the top people that weren't on the list that you would call key people. So yes, key people are part of it, and key people are part of your whole strategy. And that's, again, it's outside of this, but this is also about areas where you don't have key people. Not all crimes are stopped by just monitoring key people. Right? Not all antisocial behavior is stopped by monitoring key people. Not all burglaries are. You can take out a lot of key people, but you need to know. One of the other things is, which is actually something that I would have used in the next scenario, is what Amsterdam did. They have this list in what they call the Amsterdam Professional Criminal. And if you take the Dutch acronym for that, that's ABC. Right? Professional Boes starts with a B in Dutch, so the Amsterdam, the ABC. And they said, okay, do we really know all the professional criminals in our city? The people that should be on our list to watch, on our watch list. And what they did is they used all kinds of other information about interaction with criminals, with police, not the crime information, but interaction mostly around the red light district in Amsterdam, and all kinds of information. And they identified a pattern on how professional criminals, non-professional criminals behave versus others and versus other criminals. And they identified 35 additional people that should be on their list, using the same kind of approach, right? That should be on their list that weren't. So yes, watching the list is important, but the list can be biased, and it's kind of not the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me Richard Nixon, right? Any area you want to delve into, or other questions?
Can you get over to the analytical process?
The analytical process, sure. So we describe the process in basically three phases: capture, predict, and act. So you capture the data, and like I said, you do have crime data, and you already usually have a process in place to start off with that. A lot of cases, there's already information about weather conditions, or if they're not, they can be pretty easily obtained from all kinds of services that deliver temperature and types of weather data and things like that. And then triggers sometimes are a bit more difficult. Some of them you can build based on business rules. Right? In the Netherlands, it's pretty simple to develop a rule to determine when people get paid. It's always on the 20th of the month, or between the 20th and 26th of the month, and then you can refine it from there. But the city events sometimes more difficult. In some cases it's very easy. There are city websites that basically give a feed of all the events that are available in the city, publicly available, no privacy issues. You can use that as a first step, and you can start to refine based on that. So it really is capturing the relevant data. Now some of the crime data you may want to extend and expand by looking at sometimes you need to get into more into the details of the reports and using text analytics or content analytics. But in most cases, this is pretty straightforward to get started. And you can get started with a couple of types of data, and you can extend after that. And you put them in, and you do your risk analysis, right? And you build risk analysis per crime type. You look at what is you don't want to build models for all the crime types straight away, but you make the risk analysis. One of the key areas where we regularly start is violent crime. To reduce violent crime. How can we actually reduce violent crime? And you build models so that you can actually look at a new shift or a new period and score, given the weather, given the triggers, given my police presence, and other things. What is the likelihood of this type of crime happening now? And you score the data for that period of time, and you put it into your operational planning process. You make it available for people to say, okay, for this period, for this shift, this is my expectation of what's going to happen. So next to the traditional crime map on what has happened in the past, you say, okay, this is what happens, what we expect, right? To give an additional input for the deployment decision making on what is going to happen. And then something changes. So you change the information, and in real time you get an updated risk score back. So, okay, in the scoring, for example, I use the weather forecast. Right, weather forecast for today is raining in 5 degrees, and then suddenly it turns out it's -5, and it's sunny. Right? How does that influence my score? So you can in real time go back, but you hide it under the cover for the people using it. And then you get a feedback. Because you make decisions, you get a feedback loop. Because you make a decision. And one of the key things that you do is you make a decision to make a prediction not come true. Right? If I predict that there is a likelihood of violent crime here near Camden Town Station, and you put a police car there, it stops crime, so my prediction doesn't come true. So I need to learn from my own responses, and maybe, did I stop crime? I stopped crime in that area. Or I may have delayed it. So what is the effect, and did it move over? So I need to update it on a regular basis. So in most cases, the analysis and the scoring is updated with new data coming in on, well, in some cases in the US we're doing it on an hourly basis to make sure that you capture the latest developments and the latest trends going on in the city. That's the analytical approach, in short. In the back there? Oh, sorry. There's somebody else in the back? Yeah?
Yeah, sorry to butt in there. How does the system change with, say, a change in statutory law? For example, I'm assuming the Netherlands will adopt the banning cannabis in Amsterdam or across the state. How will it affect a policy change? How will that affect the numbers? And how could you account for that?
It would change the data, right? So if you change the definition of crime, if something is a crime or not, it changes your environment, your data. So if you make cannabis smoking legal, right, you would lose a lot of crimes in the UK that you wouldn't need to model for, right? So that would kind of reduce. The other thing is that you need to set your own priorities as a police force. What are my priority crimes that I want to go after? What are, right? Like you do now. Violent crime is usually a high priority. Property crime is usually a high priority. It changes given how you want to run your business. What are the key areas that you want to focus as a police force? And then you focus your system on that. So you define it from a perspective. But if there's a change in law about what is a crime or if it's not a crime, it basically changes the data, or it might change but it also might change the patterns. Right? If it's no longer criminal to smoke cannabis, you might actually reduce some other crimes as well, or behavior of people as well. It might increase. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what would happen if they would suddenly make cannabis smoking a crime again in the Netherlands. How people would behave. We still have problems with it, and whatever we do, it's still a problem. And around the coffee shops, we still have crime problems, right? Because not necessarily a cannabis crime, but other related drugs crime, right? Cocaine and other.
Have you run this over there?
Has it been used over in Amsterdam?
Amsterdam uses it. Not this system, not the way they do it. This type of analysis they've been doing for some time. They didn't bring something, but they also kind of predict types of crimes and deploy on that. And we've got several tests in the Netherlands, but Amsterdam is more also in the next scenarios of investigations where they're using predictive analytics pretty heavily. There's a question.
Can it actually factor in other than predictive analysis? What I'm thinking in my own force, which is police force, we work with key members of the community, MP letters, and set local policing priorities for the mixed teams. Now, some of those priorities can come out with issues such as pure visibility or focusing on traffic enforcement. And it is important for the community, who employers as the taxpayers, that we recognise those needs and deliver on those as well.
Yeah. No, you tune in and you set it to the priorities that you as a force want to do. One of the things that we also do is kind of predict traffic patterns. We don't take the crimes, but we take, for example, traffic incidents and other things. Right? That's what we do in Singapore and some other places as well. So actually, you can add traffic incidents to that, right, instead of crime incidents. It really depends on where the priority lies for your department. These are all examples. The system, the pattern for predicting those events is the same. And but there is, strangely enough, there is a lot of patterns in our behavior. Right? Although people don't really like that, but marketeers have been exploiting that for years. We've been exploiting it for years in public safety as well. But we've been kind of looking at patterns that are stable over long periods of time, and we've been looking at patterns that we could grasp within our human understanding. And those are very important, but we can refine them to a lower level with more data, which is what we have available now using this type of technology. But you do need to, and the system doesn't tell you what to do, right? The system tells you these are the risks, these are recommendations based on the data, but then you need to fit it within your force priorities, within your command and deployment structure, within your organization to actually make it work. Right? And there's impacts, and that's why you need to start small and start learning. One of the project that we're working here on the UK on repeat victimization is really about getting going on repeat victimization on our community safety officers, and how can we actually better deploy them and then moving that through the city instead of trying to do a big bang. Because you need to learn as an organization how this actually influences the way you work. Any other? One over in the back, in the corner.
Can I be forgiven for asking a crude question?
Please do.
Does it all cost?
All of it, or the start of it. Basically, stop the proposal that we have in front of the force that we've been working with on repeat victimization is about that is a basic starting package of software and basic services to get started. With training and support to do it is about £90,000. That's the starting package. If you look at what has been spent in New York on the real-time crime center with everything on it, we're talking about millions, right? And the truth will be somewhere in the middle. But again, what I urge you to do is don't try and build a system start to experiment with this approach before you learn to walk before you start to run. Does it work for your force? How do you work it? How do I fit it into my structure? How do I, which priorities do I take? Does it work for us? But because it's like I said earlier this morning, take phased step approaches and build on the value. Right? But so like I said, the kind of starting package is probably about 90,000 pounds.
Is all of Europe trying to get them signed up to the same sort of principle?
I think that it is very difficult for Europe to change. There's more interest coming from Europe. In the US, police forces can get federal budget for this. Right? They get paid to do this because it has been shown. Right? New York just had their first murder-free day in 30 years yesterday. And the crime rates, if it goes like this, their murder rate will be down to the same levels in 1966. Not only because of the analytics, but it's a large part of analytics, and there's a lot of other things that they've done. So it's not all analytics that does it. Like I said, Memphis is doing so. Lancaster, we've got some figures there. So in the US and in our areas, it's being picked up very quickly. Europe is very slow in changing. And there's probably 3 reasons for that. One is police forces in Europe are so much under pressure from all kinds of budgets, and we are still very much an input-controlled substance. The press and everybody else talks about our outputs, but we're an input-controlled organization, right? A budget-controlled organization. The other thing is basically the change that is going through not only police but and government and everywhere else is, and I'm coming back to your question, isn't this the same as we've been doing for years? And the thing is, no, it is taking the next step and actually accepting that there might be something that is better than what you've been doing is very difficult for professionals to accept. We've seen the same. We see the same in medicine. I was in a healthcare conference last week here in the UK. Right? In a lot of countries, they're using data to improve the treatment of patients in hospitals, right? Which can only be good. Right? Maybe doing less intrusive treatments, but getting better results, doing it in short periods of time. And that is something that's being picked up in Japan and in Spain, some European countries, but in other countries, doctors also are kind of say, yes, but what about my knowledge as a doctor, the art of medicine? And the key there is that the art is changing, because what this does is using and extending your developed knowledge and information, and then actually the art of policing comes in. Okay, so now we still have all these unexplained phenomena, right? This is not going to stop crime. If you stop, it is not going to stop people becoming criminals. Right? If you detect fraud, right, it doesn't stop fraud. Fraudsters will try a new way, and criminals will try a new way. It's just a matter of, okay, this is using information to be more efficient and effective in encountering them, and then focusing all our creative brain cells, not in solving problems that we've already solved, because this can help us do that, but identifying what are the new problems that we need to tackle, what are the new problems arising that we need to do. So it shifts the focus of what you're doing as a professional, but that is something that takes time. It's a culture shift. And in the US, they've started picking it up some years ago, and it's really going far. But there is something happening across Europe all the time. I agree with that. But again, some of the things that in Europe are also already happening here in the UK, but it's under the radar and it's not being picked up as a best practice not yet. But Scotland, there's some other forces that we work with that, you know.
Hi, it's Councillor Alison from you again, from Barrow Scotland. It's all very well, the modeling, I accept that it's common sense and it is also, I could call it a proactive policing. It's all very well, but especially if you are lacking resources, a police number, it's very, very hard to actually live by it. I've got many friends in the police force and they are averaging about 70, 80 hours a week they're asking work. And being honest with you, sometimes they are complaining about the fact that their ability is suffering as well. So how do you really deal with that kind of situation where numbers are low, resources are not there? How does your work fit into the real world?
How often are our police officers sent out on patrol and doing nothing? Not seeing anything, right? Or not being effective. One of the key things, not of this alone, but others, is trying to look at, okay, how can I do the same with less hours? So how can I actually maybe reduce the pressure on them? Can I maybe be more effective in planning my resources if I know where there's likely to be crime, and what times can I maybe optimize my resource planning so that they don't need to do the 80-hour weeks, but they can do less? Can we do other things with the same technology within our police force that makes life easier? There's a user story on our stand about the Groningen police. This is more about the consultative side, right? About how they get feedback from citizens about the quality of their service, and they've got a whole cycle in that where you're also already doing all sorts of good stuff in the UK. But hidden in that story is a gem of information. They have been able to look at their employee satisfaction survey and using the same technology to predict which teams had the highest probability of burnout in the next period of time, so that they could take an action to help those people before they had a burnout. So you can also use this, so this is very much focused on kind of crime, well actually only on forced employment. We're not going to get to the investigation part, I think, this session, but I'm very happy to talk to you about it. But you can use the human resources as well. But the effect of this is usually that we find that you can actually lower, one of the key KPIs that is lowered is overtime by targeting the crime value.
Thank you. Jamie Davey, barrister. Can you give us an example of where predictive analytics is likely to fail, in the sense, for example, I think of the Watts riots in America, or a couple of years ago here, sporadic rioting all over London in completely unexpected places, apparently. And it would appear that the process of deciding what you're going to do on the day may be completely confounded by the actions of even your own officers, let alone others communicating via email or whatever to set up events.
Where it's going to fail is if it's not being picked up by the organization, right? Then you might as well do it in university and write nice articles about it. Where it's going to fail if there is a very sudden incident, right? We cannot predict with this system black swans. It doesn't mean that you cannot work out the risks with other types of analytics for black swans, but it's very unlikely. Right? Terrorist attacks and others rely very heavily on intelligence and other information that will help you actually identify certain patterns and you really need people supported by this type of technology in a different capability. Where it's also going to fail is in the wrong interpretation of some of the models, right? One of the things that make this type of analysis kind of blacklisted is by the wrong interpretation by the people that didn't really understand what was happening. And the example that I always use is that in the US, right, a city once found that most of the coke dealers that they called were black and were driving a BMW. Right? So they started to stop. So that was kind of the model that they built, a very simplistic model. And so they started to stop all black people driving BMW on the suspicion of being a coke dealer, which is completely wrong because it has nothing to do with it. It's just the fact is that coke dealers drive BMWs, and within kind of the whole social structure in the US, blacks are more likely to become coke dealers because of the social environment where they live in. So that's where it's going to fail. If you take the wrong model and apply it incorrectly on the wrong area. Right? So that is also where it's going to. The other area where it's going to fail, from a legal perspective, is if you try to use it to pinpoint suspects. Right? What you can do is you cannot predict individual suspects. What you can do is predict leads, and then you need to do real investigation and additional work before you can make somebody a suspect. And the other one is you cannot use it to model individuals' behavior. It works great. It's very, very good. You could, if you look, banks and everybody would very much like to model individual behavior. And there's one simple reason: you cannot do that because of European privacy regulations. So if you do that, it's going to fail just because of judicial reasons. Those are kind of the areas where I'd say it's failed. Another question? Yeah.
Yes, this is obviously the next step, but isn't the step after that is when your criminals also use this system to find out where is the best place to do the best time to do their raids?
Yes, and actually that's happening. We know, for example, that the organized piracy operators in the world probably have a better intelligence and better analysis system than the public safety forces fighting them. They are running their business as a business, which basically means that yes, they're also using all kinds of analytics and all kinds of other things to do it. So one of the other things there is what is important, and that's again outside this, is for example insider threat detection, making your own data safe. Right? Your data are usually safe because they're not connected to any outside systems, and we have different levels of systems with different levels of protection, but you cannot protect against insiders. So one of the things that we see arise in a lot of public organizations, especially public safety organizations, is using the same analysis to analyze behavior of their systems to earlier identify the insider. Right? Cyber threat is an issue not only from the outside but also from the inside. And this will actually help you analyze also insider threat, because they do not have the data feed that we have as public safety organizations, but they are very smart in doing that in the part. One of the big issues, probably not as big an issue for your organizations, right, is regular vetting in other areas. That's not happening. So it really means that people will change over time. Their behavior will change. They get demotivated. I can tell you lots of stories about that. But you can actually use this same type of behavior to identify deviations from what you would normally expect, to identify risks for insider threats, because there is people being bought or people being corrupted in all kinds of ways. Any other questions? Because I'm keeping you from lunch. That's my argument for to keep the arms down. I will be around here for the rest of the afternoon, so please, if you want a discussion or if you don't agree, I'm happy to discuss. Thank you very much.